Okay, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with y'all here at the University of Pennsylvania at Wharton to talk about some work. Like all presentations, I'll mention that generative AI has been adopted very rapidly and that Daniel Rock is in this building right now. This is titled Some Economics of Capital Accumulation in the Age of AI. A slightly bigger title, more ambitious title than the title I had submitted. I had submitted Robots Are Us: This. But Dan took off the title of the paper, I think telling me that he wanted me to take a slightly more zoomed out view of the topic. So that's what I'll be doing in this next 15 minutes. In this presentation, I'm going to lay out a negative AI scenario you might not have considered. So I love AI, like all of us here. Oh, Dan Rock's here. Okay. All of us love AI, but I'm going to get you to think about maybe a negative potential outcome you hadn't thought about. Then I'm going to present a particular model of what the automation of the economy might look like that's going to make some stylized assumptions about how the macroeconomy works and how generative AI might flow into it. That'll kind of illustrate this point. And then I'll zoom out to the larger point, and the larger point is basically just the title. It's the fact that capital accumulation is going to be really, really important for us thinking about the long-term effects of AI. And the way that I think about it is, in AK models, K is just as important as A. All right. So what do I got for you? Why worry about AI and automation? It pushes out the production possibility frontier, so why am I worried about it? One reason you might worry is about distributional challenges and inequality. There'll be a lot of people left behind. Another reason you might worry about it is because of AI transparency and bias. Maybe you're worried that the AI is going to be unfair in some way. Maybe you're worried that the AI is going to be unaligned and kill all humans. I'm going to give you a new type of fear based on my favorite sci-fi author, Isaac Asimov. Consider the following economy. There are robots that are so productive that labor is superfluous, wages are very low, but robots I'm using loosely here for automation technology capital are so scarce that per capita income is low. Does that make sense? It's in a sci-fi novel, so it's got to make sense. Let me tell you how I think this could work. Our answer is yes. I'll show you in a very simplified model and then kind of increasingly elaborate it and show that the effect still remains. And then we'll come back again at the end to the bigger question. Well, how does this work? What happens is AI and automation technology shift factor shares from labor to capital. We have automation. That means that capital is going to be making the income and profit and capitalists instead of workers. Young workers, who are the ones who make the labor income, have a lower marginal propensity to consume than old retirees who make mostly capital income. So if you think about a life cycle, when is your highest saving period? You're saving when you're a young guy out of college, paying down your college tuition, saving for retirement. And then once you're retired, if you get an income shock, you're going to eat most of that, right? You got nothing to save for because you're going to die soon. This means that improvement in AI technology can lower saving and investments, right? So if we move money from people who have a really low marginal propensity to consume to those who have a high marginal propensity to consume, this is going to force down the savings rate. And if there's lower K, in some calibrations, the reduction in the long-term capital accumulation can lower output more than the better technology raises output. Okay, let's walk through an example. Here's the super simplified version of the model. Imagine that output was Leontief in A, which is some measure of all the AI we have in the economy, and K, which is a measure of the capital stock in the economy. Before AI exists, so A represents kind of the sum of both effective of labor of humans as well as AI labor. So before AI exists, effective labor, so this is A representing effective labor, is just the amount of L you put in times a productivity term. But after AI exists, we start to be able to build upon the efforts people made in the past. We're able to train on the previous work of labor and ultimately kind of accumulate the stock of AI knowledge about how to do tasks. And so the total supply of effective labor is going to be our accumulated tasks from the past, depreciated to some extent, plus the productivity, plus the extra labor we do today. All right, so what's going to happen after we play out this economy for a few periods, after we have a shock to delta? We start being able to retain more labor from the past. Households live 2 periods, so this is going to be an overlapping generations model, because remember my story is there's something importantly different about young people making money versus old people making money. Households live 2 periods. Their utility is from their log of consumption when they're young plus the log of consumption when they're old. There's this fee guy that represents how much they like consuming when they're old, which, when you solve the problem, turns into their saving rate. They're going to earn a wage. Your wage when you're young is the value of the labor you provide times the price of that labor, plus the value of the price of the AI that you've trained, because you get to sell that to the next generation. Households say a fee of their income. They hold their assets in the form of capital and code. So your total savings in the economy, so fee times I, fee times the young people's income, the total savings of the economy, has to equal the capital stock plus the PT times delta A, the value of all of the AI information we've acquired. M is the marginal product of effective labor, R is the marginal product of capital. Okay, so what happens when we gain the ability to store today's labor into tomorrow? So delta goes up. Well, effective labor is going to start to accumulate. We're going to start to get more and more of this effective labor. In t equals 1, output's going to increase in that first period. Recall that output is the minimum of our effective labor and our capital stock. In the past, some of our old capital was a little bit extraneous, but as we've accumulated more of this effective labor, we can make use of all of this capital, so we get a little bit of boost. We get an outcome boom from the introduction of the technology. So long as labor is relatively scarce, everything is great. The young people make all of the income, they save it, and they reinvest it. But remember, we're kind of in this knife-edge Leontief. At a certain point, there's going to be more effective labor than there is effective capital. At which case, the marginal product of labor is going to go to 0, the marginal product of capital is going to be making all of the income. What happens then? Well, you know what happens next. Once there is enough effective labor and then the price of labor goes to 0, there's nothing to be saved into the next period, society collapses, there's no more output, right? Because there was one generation of young people whose labor was worth nothing, so they had nothing to save into the next generation, there's no capital in the economy collapses, we all starve to death. This is not a violation of the fundamental welfare theorem. Rather, it's a case of just really extreme generational redistribution. That first generation does really, really good. All right, so now let's go to the second level of more complication. All right, maybe you say, all right, Professor Benzell, that's fine. But what if there's like 2 sectors? What if there's an automatable and a non-automatable sector? It's not going to help you much. It's going to help you a little bit, right? Because there's going to be some stuff that there's always going to need labor, but it might not necessarily save you. In this more complicated version of the model, you can imagine 2 different kinds of sectors. For whatever reason, we'll call it an automatable goods sector and a non-automatable services sector. I don't actually take a stance on whether goods or services are more automatable. There's placeholder names. The automatable sector can use capital and either labor or AI, and the non-automatable sector can only use labor and regular capital. Okay, and then there's going to be 2 types of labor. There's going to be a type of labor that can only work in the non-automatable sector. What do we see here? So this is dynamics after a period. So the savings rate is 20%, and we're imagining the amount of AI knowledge that is retained about the previous period's labor demand. We're saying like 70% of that is moving from the previous period into the next period. Because we're saying people are living because people live 2 periods, you might think of a period of about 30 or 40 years, right? What do we see? When the shock hits, we have a 1-period boom. National income goes up 15%. Why is that? Goods output goes up. We've got all of this leftover AI capital from the previous period. We've also have a high savings rate from the previous period. So we've got high labor and high capital in the first period. Output's great. People are doing well. That first generation, they get good high wages when they're young and a really nice high interest rate when they're old. The boomers rocket. What happens to future generations? Future generations, as that savings starts to dissipate, wages start to come down. Wages start to come down as the effective amount of labor accumulates. Labor share decreases here in this calibration from 75% to about 60%. And in the long run, all of the workers are left worse off. This is only one possible calibration. There are things you can do in order to make the change better. The biggest thing is that the thing that's most important is the initial saving rate. When the initial saving rate is low and we start retaining, so what's happening in this figure? Let me walk you through it. In this figure, we plot in colors the compensating differential for workers born in the long run after we start being able to retain previous periods as labor. On this x-axis is how good are we at that? How good are we at preserving and reenacting other people's labor through AI? And the y-axis is what's our saving rate? What's our preference for consuming when we're old? When the saving rate is really high, the more AI we get is the better. Because we have all this extra capital that we can now use AI to do cool shit with. Stuff with. But when the saving rate is low, and we start retaining a lot of AI labor from previous periods, all of a sudden we're kind of in this labor glut, wages start to come down, and that, again, through the mechanism I described, can, in the long run, lower output and people's welfare for future generations. Okay, other results. So labor share declines, and the negative welfare impact are exacerbated by a greater taste for the automatable good. So if the automatable sector is bigger, that's going to make this procedure more important. And stronger AI to capital complementarity makes this worse, right? If AI and capital are substitutes, then as you get more and more AI, you're not worried too much about driving down the human wage and driving up the interest rates. Whereas if they're more complementary, and then in the extreme Leontief, you can get this really stark wages goes to zero result. Government programs to boost saving or transfer to the young would solve the problem. Anything that's going to increase the savings rate or increase the income of the young does solve this problem. Let me show you one more level of complication, which is, well, you told me in AI, the way this AI kind of works is a little bit weird. Like we make this AI technology and it accumulates over time, but I have to pay a price for it or I have to rent it. But there's an issue which is AI is both non-rivalable. It's non-rival. So how can we include non-rivalry in this model? So we can think about rivalry and excludability in this model if we add a firm entry decision. So I'm not going to go through the details, but you can imagine a model where a firm can pay a fixed cost to enter, and then when they enter, they can either, in an excludable universe, pay money to rent the entire AI code base, or in a non-excludable universe, just by entering as a firm, they get to use the entire world's public use code base. The punchline is that moving to a world that's non-excludable and non-rival, you can still have this effect. Even if the code is free, you can still have the effect of wages go down, savings go down, long run, output goes down through that mechanism. Okay, perfect. I have a couple of minutes to go back to the big idea. All right, so what do we see in the real world? We see decreases in labor share. We see increases in intangible assets. Very lately, we've seen an increase in interest rates, even though they're kind of low historically. The recent increase in interest rates, especially eyebrow-raising, given it's an implication of leading models of automation, not only ours, but Acemoglu and Restrepo, and anticipated transformative AI, Basil Halperin's work is what I have in mind. Okay, zooming out one more time. How should we think about what a fully automated economy will look like? I gave you one kind of model of how that might kind of work. Who knows exactly? In the limit, one way economists have thought about a purely automated model is the AK model. Output is A times K. In this model, growth can be driven by a technological improvement, GA, or by reinvesting into capital deepening, having a higher saving rate. So in other words, the growth rate is the technological growth rate plus the reinvestment rate, right? The key point here is that if we're only focused on GA, and most of what I see about AI is what's going to be the effect of AI on technology, how much does this raise our productivity? Half of the game is how's AI going to change our savings rate and our reinvestment rate? So where does that leave us? What might a saving capital and reinvestment-focused version of automation studies address? How will AI-driven redistribution impact saving and consumption preferences and thereby growth? That's the story I just told you. Will the government be able to finance many pressing demands, technological unemployment, AGI races, or a new Cold War as interest rates increase? This is what keeps me up at night, and I think if you're smart, this is the macro thing you should be worried about, not Terminator robots. How can we balance the gains from automation across generations and incentivize long-term investments? And then, how can we understand the frictions in converting savings into new AI capital? It'd be great if we have a presentation on that in a little bit. Finally, I want to point you guys towards, if you think that this is an intriguing direction for research, I want to point you towards the paper that Victor and I presented here last year, which is a start, Benzell and Ye to 2024, for a start on a detailed macro model of AI growth kind of focused on these issues with maybe a more plausible model of exactly how automation works. Happy to take questions. Please listen to my podcast, Justified Posteriors.
We have 3 minutes for questions.
Yes.
So not a question, but I just wanted to add, in these more, I think, realistic calibrations that Seth and I have worked on, and given the more kind of aggressive AI scenarios that we have proposed, you do actually see this like short-term, output decline effect coupled with extremely high interest rates. So there is like a sort of a resource transfer from the young people to the old people because old people own all the assets and they've appreciated it in terms of their values.
Yeah, so it's a really important point. Even if you're not worried about kind of the growth impact of redistributing from young people to old people, you should be worried about that as just the distributional impact, right?
Boomers already have all the money.
I didn't say it, but the boomers did vote themselves these giant unfunded Social Security programs that we're going to have to deal with in the next 20, 30 years. Please.
So kind of a Huffacker 1957 question for
Please.
you. If every firm is Leontief, but the overall economy production function is Cobb Douglas, do you still face this problem? Like, how should you think about the firm level versus the aggregate production function?
I have to rest hard on the aggregate production function is going to be the only one that matters for me. In aggregate, the only thing I care about is aggregate elasticity of aggregate wage to aggregate capital, aggregate AI. So yes, you're 100% right that there can be all kinds of funky things happening at the firm level that aggregate to a nice, beautiful aggregate level. But I think for my purposes, I only need to focus on the aggregate level. Please.
Without getting too political, how do we improve the messaging, right? Because I feel like some of this is already playing out and people are getting worked up about like whether it was this leader versus that when it's more of a bigger problem that we have to solve by thinking about it on a long-term basis?
It's a really, really good question. The boomers are not known for their long-term thinking. How do we get people to understand this? I mean, people have been screaming, the deficit's falling for so long now that, kind of people don't hear it anymore. I don't have a good answer. Please.
So, you talk about the decline in savings and how that plays out. But if the wealth is transferred from, let's say, everyone into a few companies,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, you can answer.
Anyway, so that's a super good, so one way of thinking about who makes savings decisions is not that young people and old people make savings decisions, but institutions of various sizes make savings decisions. So the United States government is a very big institution and they've made the decision to have a very negative saving rate, right? Whereas Harvard is a big institution, they've made the decision to have a very positive saving rate. And you might imagine different corporations as being thought of as agents with different time horizons than the people who own stock in those companies. In a world, so one universe here is, in the long run, who ends up owning the assets is an immortal AI agent who never dies and has a very high saving rate, right? So as we move away from kind of humans making the savings decisions to either organizations or AIs making the savings decisions, I kind of have less of a theory about which direction they're going to go. But they could go different ways than what I've talked about. Please?
Yeah, just, two comments, right? Maybe there was that here, maybe two caveats. One is like you assume that the economy can be fully automated. Well, we don't know that. In fact, a lot of people think that there can be some theoretical limit
Right.
to the AI technology.
Yeah, this is. I think of this as a limit. I'm not saying this is for sure. I'm saying this is like the extreme scenario. But go ahead.
Yeah, the other comment I was thinking is that, well, again, you focus on the young people, right? That now they're also in the best position to retrain, versus maybe when you feel older and more career established, right? So, and I think you don't model that.
So that's a great point, and in fact, you can get there's a related paper by Jeff Sachs where instead of thinking about capital, like physical capital accumulation, he thinks about human capital accumulation, and in a universe where basically an analogous thing can happen if we're talking about human capital accumulation instead of physical capital accumulation. All right, so now you get to learn about this bullet points.
Okay, well, thank you very much.